we have a very specific workshop to do now. It's called From Idea to ICO in 6 months. I would start, probably you would be wondering why 6 months. ICOs, generally speaking, can be executed quickly and usually within less time than IPOs. And I will take it on a very specific example of ours. So I represent a company called Kinguin. I'm the founder and I'm the CEO. And we are just executing an ICO, right? First of all, I would like to ask, are there any entrepreneurs in this room? 1, 2. More government? All right, all right. And your interest in ICOs is because? Okay, so you actually planning an ICO potentially. All right, okay. Good. So to give you a bit an overview of Kinguin and why actually we have even thought of an ICO, what was the context for that? Was it about money? Was it about the idea? Was it about the technology? What simply led us to actually even consider an ICO? So first of all, it's good to know that Kinguin is an existing business. We are not a complete fresh startup. We have the startup mentality, but we are not a complete fresh startup, to say. We will see more and more existing businesses turning to ICOs. That's a fact. That's a fact. In that context, for an existing business to think an ICO, it's even more complex process than a startup. So startup, usually you come with an idea, you think it fits this concept just perfectly. But for an existing business, especially for us 350 employees, it's a more complex process, right? It affects ongoing operations. It affects current technology. It affects current platforms. It affects every employee in the company. So the process to do that, definitely 100%, is completely different from a fresh startup. To give further context, right? So there are ongoing profitable operations. There are actually daily transactions taking place on the platform, and there are many of them. There is a huge database of existing followers, users. And there is a history, there is a legacy behind the company. So how do you deal with all of that? Honestly speaking, I learned about blockchain and the ICOs about 1 year ago. And 6 months down the line, we decided actually to launch our ICO. So it's supposed also to be a workshop, so we will have some kind of interactive moments. Our first consideration, is blockchain a technology for us? What is blockchain anyway? Any idea? Anybody who can define blockchain maybe in one sentence? If you think about blockchain, I mean, you hear it all over the news, what's the first words come to your mind to describe it? Digitalization of money, yes. Anything else?
I mean, it's a decentralized ledger.
Decentralized ledger, of course. Anything else, I mean, you see it in so many contexts, all around the news. I would say decentralized ledger, describes it probably the most accurate here. It's basically an accounting system, right? So once the information gets inside the ledger, it's there. It's irreversible, basically, right? So it's basically a system to document things, right? So by that, it's apparent it's about more transparency in anything we do, right? And this is kind of like the angle where we looked at this. I mean, we have transactions which happen online, many of them. So how about we make this information more transparent, right? What kind of benefits this brings to our users? You know, you start thinking of the process, you need to start a kind of reverse engineering here, from the user, you know, to the technology itself. Does it actually make sense to have this technology at all in our business, you know? So this also brings me to your ideas about blockchain, about ICOs. Do you actually need blockchain in your business, you know, or you don't? Do you think blockchain is suitable for all kinds of businesses? Is it good for finance? Right? I mean, we see so many banks, card issuers, fintechs, everybody in finance speaking about blockchain. For some, it's a threat. It's something they don't understand. It's something they don't want. But for most of them, it's actually an opportunity, right? I mean, we see even the biggest corporation like MasterCard actually working with blockchain, no? So, is it good for real estate? We see actually lots of developers looking at blockchain very seriously, you know? It's about, for them, it's about tokenizing their real estate activities, physical locations and stuff. Is it good for gaming? And yes, I forgot to say that Kinguin is a video games marketplace, right? So people with us, the transaction, they come and sell and buy video games. For us, it was a no-brainer. Not only that, the transparency it brings into the system, and this also makes us unique to the competition, you know, especially from existing marketplaces out there. I'm not mentioning also startups. But also, gamers are the most likely early adopters of this technology. Why? Because gamers, they live in microtransactions every single day. Any game they play, they do a kind of microtransaction inside with virtual currencies. They buy it with fiat currency, you know, and then they spend the currency in the game or even outside the game. This is maybe a little known fact, you know, to most of us, that the current virtual currencies with existing in games, they are actually tradable outside the games. So gamers actually working with cryptocurrencies without calling them cryptocurrencies. This is a fact. This is a fact. So for us, as a video game business, it of course makes the perfect sense to adopt this kind of technology. We are not a video game developer who issues. Currently, the biggest issuers of virtual currencies are video game developers. You may think of companies like Electronic Arts, maybe known to many of you, EA, Activision, you know, some Tencent, right? The biggest video gaming company on earth from China. All these work with, they are issuers of de facto cryptocurrencies, right? They just don't call them that. So it's a very good idea to think, is blockchain good for my business? What kind of advantages it brings to my business? And start the process there, you know? If you reach the conclusion, yes, this is a technology which can be adopted by my business, it helps to expand my business, then I can think forward from there. Now, thinking that your project can adopt blockchain. In my personal opinion, almost everybody will go into blockchain. And why is that? the idea of decentralization, generally speaking, is close to all of us, to our hearts, to our minds. It's something we can understand, we can accept without any fight almost, right? We see it as a rebellion against existing systems. We see it as a chance to build something new, more attractive, more fair for everybody included. And blockchain actually really offers that. The very kind of like component which is in blockchain, which enables that to happen, it's not only the storage of the technology, and here we have to realize the storage of the technology itself, it's a very complex process from technology point of view, okay? It would be very, I mean, when we say like the information is written in there, but we need to realize all this information is written in very complex hashtags, you know, you have to kind of like to decipher this information in order actually to get to actual real information. So what makes it actually so sexy? There is a component into blockchain which being talked about also in the news, but we have a very little understanding of, and that's basically the smart contracts, right? So the smart contracts, this is where it comes, where the whole thing is automated, right? In our very specific case, what does that mean? Once we issue a token, it's assigned to a smart contract. The token is issued to the consumers, and based on that smart contract which is included in the token, you know, things happen automatically. Just look at it, you know, from a very high level point of view. You know, we don't need to go into very specific technical details. You probably remember the internet era, right? At the very start of the internet era, all the talk was about HTTP, SMTP, you know, all these terms which we didn't fully actually understand. And if you look at it from today's point of view, there is no need to understand that. There are, you know, the technical experts who take care of that. You know, they just make it happen. It's like the magic behind. It just happens, you know. And here, so I will definitely try to focus, you know, on the bigger terms, on the bigger meaning of things. And so this is the smart contract. It just makes things really happen, you know, without the involvement, without any third party. And this is the sexiness about it, that for the user, for both users, they know they have to act according to this contract. And it's either usually a yes or no at the end of the contract. Did it happen? Did it not happen? If yes, it happened. And this is usually also tied to other automated measures outside of the blockchain itself. This is important to realize. Outside of the blockchain itself, you either are getting the reward from that smart contract or you are not. So this is the very basic of smart contract. To tell you a very specific example from our case. So we are issuing a token to the user that says, if you spend, for example, if you buy a service from us, you don't buy only games, you can buy actually a service of other human, right? So I think this example can relate to most of us. Not buying a product, physical product, because physical product, the transaction finishes once. Simply you go through the checkout and it's yours, it's your property, etc. So it's too primitive, I would say. But if you buy the service of other human, in our case, it can be a good guy who plays this game just better than me, and I want him to teach me how to play this game more proper. I have only 10 minutes, so I buy his service for 10 minutes. Now, the smart contract, what it does, and it's possible in today's technology, that it connects to the servers to the game through an API and measures the time when me and my new coach, we are basically on that server. So then starts a countdown. Of course, they don't know exactly the content of our conversation, etc. Of course, this is far beyond today's the technology capabilities. but they simply starting to measure a time where we are together on a server. Once this time finishes for any reason, interrupted, for example, by any of the users, interrupted by technological breakdown of the internet whatsoever, the smart contract stops to execute, right? But for example, even if we spend on the server today, together for 50 seconds, and for example, I realized that the guy, he's basically bullshitting me, he's not that good coach I was thinking of, I'm simply, you know, cutting the connection, and I'm paying him exactly for that 50 seconds. So this is the power, you know, of smart contracts. Outside of the blockchain, I still give him a bad review for his service, or good one if that happens, and this is a guideline for the other users, you know. But here where the blockchain can store the review score, it can store the duration, you know, how many sessions this guy had, etc., 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 right? And this goes into the blockchain. So this is one of the most, and it's a trustless system, right? So I don't need to, as a user, to rely on the information from Penguin, whether, or from the information, for example, of Amazon, whether that review is correct or not, you know. It's simply there. It's from actually real users and stuff. So this is the context of blockchain coming into your business. Do you feel, you know, from what we talked, that this is something can apply to your specific case as well? Yes? What kind of business are you looking to have the blockchain in? Okay, understand. Well, usually you don't replace transactions by blockchain. The blockchain is a complementary tool to all of that, right? Also, it's good to realize that blockchain, in its essence, it's a very slow technology, right? Very slow, very difficult in scalability as well, right? You might probably know that the average Bitcoin transaction takes about 10 minutes to be 100% verified. To process transactions in this currency. I would say that the problem of Bitcoin is that it's built on very archaic technology. It's built basically on the first generation of blockchain. If you look from practical point of view, if you have any Bitcoins on a physical wallet on your computer, that's basically a 250 gigabytes hard drive, which is just sitting there, you know. Many argue that Bitcoin is, of course, is going to disappear, etc. But now we see the new generation of the cryptocurrencies. They are much smarter. They usually built on faster platforms. They are built with added value to that. You know, it's not only about the storage of value itself, like Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is something I give you. You know, you keep it. You know, it might have now it has a certain value. It might have a bigger value, and this is what all the Bitcoin is about right now. It's not about microtransactions. It's not about a real daily usage of that. You know? Some people compare it to assets like gold, right? I can buy a house from you. I can pay for my children's educations with Bitcoin. You know, this kind of transaction, but it's not for daily usage. The current cryptocurrencies, which are built on Ethereum, on even more advanced private blockchains. Even there are new so-called consensuses which are even sometimes 100% faster and advanced than blockchain itself. They have additional usage, not only the storage of the value, right? So in many cases we call them also as utility tokens, right? In some cases also we call them equity tokens, right? So this is the next kind of, I would say, the chapter of ours is what kind of ICO do you want to do, right? So we said, we talked, assuming that your project actually can use blockchain in its essence as a method basically to increase transparency of your systems, and as such you increase the probability of the growth of your system because you are solving, for example, the trust issue with your platform. Let's realize, like in the current economy, or the older economy, if we may call it, compared to blockchain, what, for example, companies like Uber or Airbnb solve for us? They solve for us a trust issue having a ride with a stranger. They solve for us a trust issue sleeping in a stranger house, right? Big issues which kind of like needed very, let's say, brilliant minds, a very brilliant execution to happen, you know. And in blockchain, it happens automatically. You don't have to solve that issue anymore. You can focus on other smart aspects of your business, right? So in the very first place, it's about transparency of the system, the transparency of your project. Speaking of that, so how do you proceed further? What kind of token do you want to create? First of all, what are ICO anyway? So ICO stands for initial coin offering, right? It's a very similar to IPO as a term. With ICO, you have a choice at the very start to do. And now I'm talking not about the context of ICO in the last 2 years. I'm talking about the context of ICOs in terms of now. And why in terms of now? Because the landscape of ICO is changing very quickly. It's becoming harder to initiate an ICO. It's becoming harder to execute an ICO. It's becoming also harder in terms of regulations. And regulations here are a very important issue. For us as a company based in the EU, we can't ignore the signals coming from the European Commission, you know, coming from the SEC, from the United States. The SEC, the Federal Commission in the US for Securities, announced there was a recent hearing. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, which was a very detailed hearing, you know, of members of the Senate, of responsible figures about their views on the blockchain, on initial coin offerings, and as such, it's not a law, you know, but it's a very good base to be a law in very recent time. So their view was on they said literally that most of the ICOs up to date are considered securities. You know, you may say you have a cryptocurrency which is not a security, but in the eye of SEC, it's a security. And they don't care if you call it a security or you don't call it a security. So this is a very thing to realize now. Does somebody realize what's the difference when we call a token security and not? What that means in practice?
We have a range of laws which apply to securities. There's no laws about cryptocurrencies.
Exactly. Okay.
We're regulated operators, and we have to become regulated.
Exactly. Exactly. So they basically said most of the ICOs up to date are securities, and we don't have a single ICO registered with us as a security. Generally speaking, this is a bad news for the industry, you know, because the regulation will go into the direction of protecting the retail investor. This is what they will care about. They will care less about the professional investors, because as a professional investor, you are supposed to know what you're doing, and you are supposed to assume your risks, you know, evaluate, and based on that, you make a qualified decision. But the retail investor is it's a completely different story, right? The retail investor usually acts often based on impulse, because that's a good guy, he said that, you know, I think I respect his views, this is a reason why I'm going to invest into ICOs. You see huge conventions happening in China where not the CEOs, you know, or the representatives of the company are making a pitch to you, but it's a famous actor on the screen. It's an Olympic winner, you know, speaking about tokens and blockchain from a predefined script, and you see huge applause in the audience. You know, we are in a very private setup here, but there the convention happens with 1,000-2,000 people. You know, most of the people sitting there are they probably might not fulfill your definition of an investor. You know, but usually they are experienced crypto traders. So they look. Their assessment is not even about the project itself anymore. It's about whether there is a chance this token will go up for a short period of time, and this is where I join the pump, and then I dump just in the right time. You know, this is also why you see so many fluctuancies also in the cryptocurrencies currently. So what kind of tokens do I issue? Very simple answer and specific advice here. Within the European Union and in the US, we should be working with only utility tokens for now. We don't talk about cryptocurrency at all. This is anything you want to do, you don't want to call it a cryptocurrency, period. Right? So you focus on your own project, you see what this token can actually initiate on your platform as a functionality. You know, you attach it basically to your existing users, what they willing to do. In our specific example, I mentioned this example of a guy wants to use the services of another guy into simply providing a service. You know, think about practical usage of your token. Make it a utility token. There is also another way to approach this. You can actually define it from the very start as an equity token. Then you are 100% clear. You are saying, okay, this is a security. No, I want to register with the appropriate authorities. It's 100% transparent, and I'm going only for accredited investors. Period. In both options, you are not doing any public offering. So no retail investors basically are included, right? I don't make any AdWords about this. I don't make any Facebook ads. They were banned by Facebook, by the way. All crypto and ICO ads were recently banned by Facebook. You don't want the crowd involved. You may want them to know that there is an ICO going on. It's a good market. It's a free marketing of your project, you know. But you don't want them involved, actually physically buying your tokens for their last $100 or whatever capital they may think they would be. So no public offering. And this is actually also what we're doing. So first we planned from the very start, we started our planning in September. 30th of March is our ICO. And we had to change, and we had to, I don't want to say call the ICO off, but we simply said the ICO will be open only for accredited investors. No public will be allowed to join. In a little bit.
Sorry, how do they get accredited?
This is a very good question, right? So there is a consensus on a KYC process, know your customer, in the industry, and you can adopt that basically to accredit investors on your own, right? So this can be also a retail investor who heard about your ICO and they want to enter the process. Well, they can enter through an automated basically script on the website which says, okay, here is the donation page. You go, proceed your funds, you sign then a DocuSign or some electronic document, and that's it, or you agree to the terms of conditions of the sale. It has to go through a private sale. Legally speaking, this means the guy has to connect to you. You have to conduct at least a recorded Skype call with this person, informing them about the project, informing them about the risk, including in the investment. And by the end of the session, yes, you can say this is an accredited investor.
So it's not a self-accredited investor?
If you have, for example, an accreditation from other sources, you can use this and say, okay, then I also accept it within my system, right? I mean, sorry. The burden of the proof before the authorities, at the end of the day, it goes on you. You have to prove that this is an accredited investor, an educated investor. They know what they're doing in your case, right? You haven't made a public influence on people, using celebrities. Also, probably usage of celebrities was also banned in the U.S. To promote cryptocurrencies or initial coin offerings. It didn't happen in Europe, for example, but there is a good sense of self-regulation within the blockchain, the ICO industry itself. Like, if this is a signal coming from the US and they're saying don't do that, we also usually don't do it in Europe as well. So in terms of jurisdiction, we ourselves chose Estonia within the European Union, and that's because two things. So it's always good that you look at your kind of like ICO beyond the ICO itself. In our very specific case, Estonia, first of all, it has a very favorable views on ICOs, on blockchain. They're becoming also a hub in Europe, which is attracting this kind of startups. The other jurisdiction might be, for example, Switzerland, Isle of Man, Gibraltar. The other reason why we choose also Estonia, because it has good terms when it comes to applying to money license. And in our case, this is very important. So right now, as our legal headquarters are based in Hong Kong, as a company in Hong Kong which deals in transactions, we cannot accept credit cards directly on our website. We cannot store information from credit cards in our database. By being in an EU country like Estonia, and assume that we are provided with the money license, the game changes for us, right? We can accept fiat currency. We can actually become to a certain point a crypto exchange ourselves. We accept the fiat currency and we turn it automatically into our cryptocurrency, right? This is another practical thing about banks, ICO. So you see increasingly the news that banks are starting to charge more, for cryptocurrencies purchasing. In many jurisdictions, they are actually not even accepting ICOs to open bank accounts. Estonia has a favorable approach in this matter, And we managed actually to open our bank account there, to set up a legal entity, to announce the ICO from there, and everything just goes in as planned. Speaking of regulation again, we can expect very specific and tough regulation of ICOs in the upcoming 6 to 9 months. The European direction is trying to rush this to be as soon as June as July, the first one. About EU directive, it's good also to understand it's a directive, so it's basically it's a recommendation that you do this and you do that from a certain point in time. And it's also needs in many cases ratification from the member 28 countries right now, including the United Kingdom. But most likely this will be, they will say in June, July, so these are our directives for ICO. This is the list you have to comply with. This is the authority you have to register within the European Union if you want to run an ICO for European citizens or European investors. And you are supposed to comply with that by the 1st of January 2018, right? This makes it simple and clear, maybe more complicated, maybe more rigorous process for upcoming startups or companies who are planning to do ICOs, and there are many of them in Europe which are tied by their national jurisdictions, not able to do ICOs simply now. For example, simply because you are a publicly listed company. So there are specific regulations to your case which forbid you from proceeding with an ICO. This regulation is most likely going to protect the retail investors, as mentioned, and it will go into the direction, most likely, of saying there will be a cap on your investment into a single ICO. We expect this cap to be anything from 3,000 to 5,000 euro per retail investor. Right? So we said we're not doing any public offering. This is a utility token, what we are using, and it will be available for the users on the platform. We are accepting accredited investors to invest in the ICO in closed rounds. And we are going to turn our token into a cryptocurrency once the regulations caught up with technology. Once there is a clear process how to register an ICO, how to register your token, how to register your cryptocurrency, then we are going to turn this into an official cryptocurrency. All right, we are going much in time, and we haven't spoke a lot about the actual campaign itself, the preparation of the ICO. And any questions up to now? All right. I would like to ask you, do you think that any of the current ICOs up to date, they have raised the fair amount of money they were supposed to raise? I think you probably hear, in the news these crazy figures. This ICO raised 100 million, that 200 million, 250 million in cases. Some of them raise 5, 10 million. But we hear the big splash about the big ICOs. My personal honest question to that, they don't need to raise that amount of money. Actually, for many of them, it's becoming a big issue collecting that kind of money so early. There is a logic behind, like where you in the classic venture capital world, you go through round A, B, etc. Right? I mean, there are different growth stages to your company, and you are supposed to act a bit differently in each stage. So in an ICO, I might getting so much money that I'm supposed to get in round C, maybe. Maybe I'm not supposed to get this money at all, because my idea is not working, you know? I mean, there is no proof of concept of any kind, right? I mean, you see the principle of ICOs operating right now. It's usually based on a white paper published on the internet, and this is supposed to be your judgment call whether to invest or not invest. So how much money to raise? There is a good practical answer to that, and we also started adopting this. When we announced our ICO, we said we want to collect $50 million for 30% of the tokens. In fact, as an existing company turning profit, we need about $5–6 million to invest in the current technology, you know, to upgrade it to a state where we can adopt blockchain into the current systems, into current architecture, develop our base of engineers, you know, all this know-how related to blockchain. A good way to go around this is to have, and this will become a more popular trend, you will see it, so-called ICO rounds. This simply means you don't collect the whole money at once, but you collect it in stages. In our very specific case, this means 30%, we are dividing it within 6 months, and each stage will consist of 5%. Not only that, we attach each phase to specific milestones. We say the 5%, for example, we want to collect up to 5 million in closed rounds. These are closed rounds. These are not public rounds. Okay? And this will be tied to developing this kind of infrastructure. We deliver on that promise. You know, we said, okay, we've been successful. There is a big motivation for us to deliver in time, you know, before the next round. And then we say, okay, we achieved on this. We have first proof of concept. Maybe we generated this kind of traffic. Maybe we generated this kind of revenue thanks to these features we have, to the MVP, let's say, right, with the first. And then we move to the next round. Next. This has a very profound and excellent impact on the startup itself and on the investors joining this kind of concept. Why? For the startup, usually in the initiation round, it collects the money it would like to collect without a big issue, provided that you have a good concept, you know, understandable, you have a quality wallpaper, etc., etc. And for the investor, they're buying in early, so you have a good discount on the token. Now, coming into the next round, and you provided that you have delivered on your promises, you know, everything is going just fine, you are suddenly able to ask more for the next round of tokens. The appreciations will be bigger, right? So instead of saying, let's say, I would use for the sake of clarity, just saying one token is $1. In the first round, in the second round, you can say, well, we think now our token is valued at 1.2, 1.3. Not to go up too much, right? 1.2, this is already a different 20%, you know, to the first round. It's 40% for those who bought at 20% discount in the first round. And this happens only in the second round. Imagine what can happen by the sixth round, right? So it's a beneficial thing. One of the things which worries investors a lot about ICOs is dilution. So there are actually multiple ICOs out there which, in the face of big demand of their token, of their concept, in the last minute before doing the physical ICO itself, this means doing these automated scripts on the website and stuff, they have increased their token value by 10 times. This means anyone who bought, you know, before in early stages got diluted by 90%. This is a big frustration to investors. ICO rounds basically prevent that. It says basically, yes, down the line there will be a bidding system, but it's open, it's fair, and it's the furthest, it's the most fair towards the very early investors coming into this, you know? In our own calculations, again, as a very specific examples, we counted into a very moderate ICO rounds. Within 6 months, we will be collecting 53 million for 25% of the tokens instead of the 30% tokens we calculated at the very start. In a more aggressive scenario, if we deliver and we have proof of concept and actually we are monetizing the features we are doing, because at the end of the day you are doing an assumption that your feature will mean something to the world, that there will be actually somebody is using that, you know, and acting. If that happens well, then we may raise with the same amount of tokens up to 87 million US dollars because of the appreciation of the token through time, right? And that's before we make even any public offering. As I said, don't do any public offering until you have a proper regulation in place. That's my advice, but still many ICOs out there, they're simply ongoing with their ICOs and stuff. That's an interesting thing. Most likely what regulation will say also, any existing ICOs up to date, they will have a chance and they will have a specific deadline for compliance to catch up with the regulation. That's very normal, right? I mean, in EU directives, you see it all the time. If you have any national laws which are contradicting the EU directive, you have usually anything a period from 6 months to 2 years, you know, to catch up with the legislation of the European Union. The same will happen with ICOs, except probably the only difference will be that they will be given much shorter deadline. We think this will be up to 3 months. If the EU directive will say the retail investor is allowed to invest a maximum of 3,000 euros, this means by law, they don't even have to say this, this means anything above that amount you are supposed to give it back to your retail investor. I mean, imagine what kind of like chaos and complication this will bring to existing ICOs, right? So this is, if you are thinking about an ICO, you probably want to avoid this kind of trouble. We spoke about jurisdictions, you know, we have only 10 minutes left, I'm sorry for that. More or less, right now in the world, I would say there are very few jurisdictions which are favorable to ICOs. The most ICO funds currently are raised in Switzerland, worldwide. It's even more than ICOs which were raised with base in the US. So Switzerland comes on the very first place, US on the second when it comes to volumes of ICO funds raised up to date. Then are all the others. You know, it's like Switzerland, it's like here, US here, and all the others are more like flat, you know, in that chart. Switzerland, it gains from the fact it's not within the European Union, right? It has set up a very effective process when it comes to the protection of investors and the protection of the startups also doing an ICO. So it goes both ways. You need at least about 3 to 4 months and about 150,000 euros just to set up a legal entity which was able to issue tokens in Switzerland. You know, so it's time-consuming process as well. And then you have restrictions on the ICO itself, the way you can promote it and stuff. So definitely Switzerland, for those who want to do, I would say, the most proper ICO. I believe Estonia, when it comes to from the European member countries, is probably comes on the second place. When it comes to the fairness of the jurisdiction, the reliability and the easiness, to set up and operate an ICO. The Isle of Man also has a very favorable conditions for ICOs, and then comes Gibraltar. In Asia, it's usually Singapore, still, for those who, it's especially attractive actually for Chinese investors who usually don't actually do the ICOs themselves because they are banned in China, but they do it through third-party vehicles. And just, a kind of interesting note, you probably already know this, I mean, more and more ICO money coming from China, they're coming specifically to Singapore, not to Hong Kong, but to Singapore, because also Singapore has, it doesn't actually have a treaty with China of exchange of information. One of the very few jurisdictions in the world which doesn't comply with China, unlike Hong Kong, for example. So yes, the Chinese money is simply running into Singapore. Any questions in terms of jurisdictions, maybe the ICO rounds, anything up to date? So I'm going to run very quickly into some practical aspect of running an ICO. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm open to any even private questions after that. The question is, who do you hire in your ICO campaign? Right? What kind of staff do you need actually to execute an ICO? So we are moderate company, 350 employees. We figured out this is a very new competency. We need people actually who understand blockchain. Yes, we have blockchain enthusiasts in our company, but that doesn't make them any experts in the field. Their knowledge is very valuable. However, we decided to set up a completely separate team from the company to run the ICO. Especially if you want to do it in a short period of time, you want this team as less possibly as attached to your current structures. You don't want, to go to anything there to happen through the usual bottlenecks within your existing company. A very specific example, very simple example. Like a banner on the website, right? Or a link to an article whatsoever. You want this to appear on your website, on your socials as soon as possible. In our specific example, we have a procedure inside the company which says any post has to be approved by this guy, this guy. Right? This is a bottleneck in this case. You want a separate campaign to run as efficiently, as smooth as possible. Yes, it can work nicely 1, 2, 3 times. At the 4th time, you might have an issue because you needed to release this news just in time, for example, before attending to here. You don't want it 5 hours later, 6 hours later. You want as less friction as possible in your ICO process. We achieved this big time by giving the team, which is responsible for the ICO itself, the biggest independency and the power possible to, and then also comes the power of responsibility, right? If there is a fuck up, so to say, you're going after very specific people why this happened, and you're not going through the entire company, which creates even further friction. So you want to hire a team which is able to execute the ICO, and ideally this is your internal team. This is not reliant on an external advising company, so to say. We don't have a good experience here when it comes. I mean, you can see it over LinkedIn, all over the web. If you just Google, the blockchain as a new economy has created actually a new economy also in terms of blockchain experts, blockchain advisors. Everybody there is claiming to be the best advisor in the world. They can raise the all money you need, and you don't have almost to raise a finger. No. I mean, honestly, with any company we've been in touch there, it doesn't work this way. At the end of the day, the biggest burden of raising the funds actually lies on you yourself. Yes, this company can make you intros, but believe me, they make these intros for so many other people as well. You know? I mean, you want your own staff, your own strategy. You need to figure your own way how to. When it comes to raising funds and teams and stuff, we will see a trend where this will be even more regionalized than today. What do I mean by that? Many of the past ICOs, they had easy time to raise funds globally. This is changing. This is already changing. It's a good idea to think if you are going to launch an ICO, and probably, let's say, it's not Telegram in terms of scale and magnitude and sexiness and stuff, you probably want to stick to your region to raise your funds. One of our biggest surprises with our own ICO, our company is based in Poland. So we announced a private round. We are a global company. We have a footprint from Australia to the US. We've been attending conferences in Santa Clara, in Singapore, in Hong Kong. And we thought logically, the biggest money is in Singapore, is in Hong Kong, is in Silicon Valley. This will be the biggest contributor to our campaign. We didn't do a single conference in Poland. What happened with our private round, we got most of the funds from Poland. From our home territory, and completely unexpected, And most of it is smart money coming from venture capital, who had never touched ICOs before, And we realized, okay, so here is the element of trust as well. These guys know that we are from there. They've been watching us for some time, They're interested. But we didn't think that they're interested, and we haven't even approached them. But not only because of that, it's the trust issue, etc. It will be increasingly more expensive to run ICOs. Right now, if you run an ICO and you want to participate in any conference, you have to count with a minimum spend of anything between 10,000, let's say, to 30,000 US dollars per conference to make any kind of impact. This is huge. It's becoming increasingly different to separate the good blockchain and ICO conferences from the bad ones. Because blockchain ICOs itself has created this other new economy where so many people feel they are entitled to run conferences. There are so-called conferences which we used to use the slang bottom feeders. People, maybe many devs come, but I'm not going to raise money from developers. They're interested in the technology. They might be people who are just mostly retail investors. So it will be increasingly difficult to raise the money globally, and it's a good idea to think in your strategy. Especially if you have, let's say, six months time frame to focus on your region. Is it Eastern Europe? Is it Western Europe? Is it the Oceanic? Is it more like Southeast Asia? And believe me, you will always find ways to raise these funds, provided that you have a good idea and stuff. Very quickly, advisors. Advisors are highly necessary for any ICO project. You don't want too many of them. You don't want too few of them. You want them. The problem with the advisors, they sell themselves very highly, right? So I know this, I know that, I know that. I suggest to have this kind of conversation. I had. I had this conversation with an advisor who was the second in row, actually, through all my talks, who claimed to want 1% of the total token pool. So you just understand, usually you give advisors percentage from the raised funds. Usually they don't want to take money only from the funds raised themselves, claiming that it might go through back channels and stuff, and they are not able, nobody is able to monitor that. That's a fair assumption overall, yes. But then you give percentage from the total funds. I suggest you don't give anything be above 0.25% to any single advisor. Unless you are maybe having a Matt Damon on board, that's probably can be different, But generally speaking, don't give, any big percentages. This is also a mistake also we learn. But I had also requests where they not requesting only, because when we say 1% from total raise, this could be only from 30% of your tokens. But there are people who coming to you and they say, you know what, you don't have to pay me any money. You can pay me from your total token pool. So basically your crypto, for you it might seem, okay, this is silly money. I give him my crypto and maybe he would be able to monetize that, maybe not, And they claim, for example, they want % from the total token pool. In our case, we calculated this, okay, so I'll be giving you $1.6 million in tokens. What are you able to deliver back to me? And you go through this conversation and, okay, I know these bankers, I know these guys. I will recommend you here. I will put you on my LinkedIn, so many views and stuff. They usually tend to talk about the references from the past. I used to be an advisor this and this. And I recommend simply that you go through this very specific conversation. Okay, so you work for that specific project. How much money have you raised yourself, honestly? Let's have this honest conversation, And it turns out that he raised, by his own effort, by his own words, 200K. And he wants 1%. So where is the judgment here, right? So this is when it comes to advisors. For us, it proved to be good that we stuck mostly not to blockchain advisors per se, or crypto advisors who have influence over the crypto community. We have stuck to people from our own industry. People actually who can give a qualified, good opinion about our product. People who actually understand our product. They don't look at it, as just a way, okay, you have this good idea, it's not from my branch or my field, I think I can raise money for you. Yes, you can, of course, but then you can work with the cost on capital, you don't have necessarily to list that guy as an advisor to your project and give them, a percentage from your token pool or from raised funds. So it proved really for us, we took people from video gaming, from esports, these are people who understand what we're trying to build. And they also are able, so we have on LinkedIn with these guys, because they are from all over the world, of course, we have a central group where we discuss our ideas. We challenge our ideas through our advisors, because before it goes public, we get feedback, we get real feedback. Also, this is a good way also to filter, you can have a potential advisory board, try to think, and you see reactions. Who is actually helping you? Who used to be the most talkative at start, and now they're bringing, they're delivering on their entry declarations. And believe me, you will be able to filter out very, very quickly. One of the last things, 6 months, that's a very short period of time to execute an ICO. You have a team in place. You definitely need a very competent project manager to run your ICO from execution point of view. A very competent project manager. So this is, I think, this is your key hire. Once you have that guy, you let him hire the rest of the team. You don't have to care about that too much. Because if he's really competent, he will set up this competent team for you. The media campaign associated with that. So, as I said, we've been experimenting at start. We went to conferences, we sponsored conferences before actually raising any money, just, to test the waters out there and stuff. And it didn't bring that value, honestly speaking. What we have found is much better thing to do. Within the same budget, if you can afford that, run your own events. There are probably only 2 companies I know about which are doing this kind of thing now. The first is D10. You probably might know this series of summits. They run twice a month, and they're using it also as to incubate startups in blockchain. And then there is us I know about that. For the sake of our own ICO, we run our own events. We call them Kinguin and Friends. One will be actually tomorrow here in Istanbul, and we run them in the places where we know there is a good potential to raise funds. So we've done it in Dubai, we've done it actually in Warsaw, we are doing this in Singapore. Look at the advantages. So just you have a very real perspective of things. The budget here we're talking about is anything between 10,000 euros to 20,000 euros. That's your maximum budget. That's not a lot of money. I mean, you really pay for this, for the speaker opportunity at a conference. And you have 5 minutes, usually, to pitch your ICO. You are buying this slot for that kind of money. If you actually combine the efforts, you make your own event, it doesn't have to be a long one. We usually make it like 2-3 hours. This is not a long session, But we have better chance to pitch. We bring usually our advisors, to join us. They have their own smart talk. You present yourself, but the most important thing, the whole attention is on you. It's not like you finish your 5 minutes pitch, and now the next guy comes in line, who might actually smash you, So. This kind of thing, this is proving to be a big thingy. Another thing associated with that, it's just the human ego. So you have many people who would like to attend on conferences as speakers, right? Because it fulfills their ego, and you give them the chance actually to be on your own event, speaking to smart people, right? But you are not paying anything on top. But suddenly, your ICO is associated with this smart guy. Because you can publish an interview on your website. He's talking about blockchain, ICO in general. And there is a very good chance he will say some good words about you. So you have a very good endorsement from a very smart guy, etc. I suggest, for example, you check our Kinguin and Friends on YouTube, and you will find, and these are also good talks for the industry itself. Because we talk about blockchain, we talk about esports, investments, data. So if you have the competent project management guy, he will have a media manager for you. Definitely within the media plan, you need a set of deliverables predefined. I have run out of time here. Is there any aspect you think we forgot about, how to actually get, an ICO from an idea to execution in 6 months? Yes, please.
I'm Vlado from Co-Founded. We did, in the last 2 years, I think on average, we analyzed about 100 blockchain companies per month with economy. We raised a few hundred million. We're developers as well, and in this last year we turned into a fund. So,
all right, congratulations for that.
Thank you. We turned into a fund, Series A, Series B, C, also just for blockchain. But
right.
The thing is that we learned. I think now we are the most in-depth company because we have lawyers all over the world and everything for blockchain, and we work with governments. And there is, I like your company personally. We also do it in the company.
Okay, thank you.
But there are some things with blockchain that are very, let's say, dangerous now. So every 3 months, everything changes.
Yes, that's very true.
And the problem with these advisors that you mentioned before, actually, they are not allowed to charge you based on success, because this is brokerage. And it's, for example, in the US, it's already a federal crime. So you have to be very careful with advisors. If they
Yes.
tell you, give me some part of what I calculate, that's wrong. You have to make different kind of arrangements with them. And also, that's one thing. Before you work with any advisor from any country, it makes sense to see what the legislation is there and for your country. Otherwise, you will be in trouble, and it's not your fault really. And the second thing is, if you are raising X amount for your project, right? And then maybe in 5 years you will need more. You will talk to some, or you want to talk to some institutional investors. You have to be very careful about what your token does. For
Yes.
example, if your token has any kind of voting rights or whatever, no fund will ever touch you, no investor will touch you because it's too complicated for them. So you have to involve legal or financial or expert advice on day one. And I like what you said, you have to, it's your responsibility to do it from day
Exactly. It's your responsibility. The legally speaking, they will go after you. Yeah, that's one of the things. Very, very, very good point I forgot to mention. Anything you see in our white paper always go through at least 3 legal jurisdictions, through 3 legal different companies. And we had to exclude at least one very excellent idea we consider to be one of the major throws of our ICO. We had to exclude it from there because simply legally speaking, you will be considered a security, and that's, you don't want that, right? So yes, any other questions maybe? Or any other notes actually would like to share with all of us?
Is it really difficult?
Sorry.
Do you do any kind of know your customer from actual customer? Do you know your investor?
Come again?
Do you do on your ICO? Do you do any kind of know your investor checking or just getting their?
Okay. So for us, fortunately so far, I mean, any single investor is either there are people who we know in person or who has been introduced through our network, you know. So we have gone to, you know, through private talks, in many cases actually multiple of them, you know. And the reference always is also important, you know. So it's not just a guy, it's usually a guy I know for X years, you know, a company, he has this company, that one. So yes, in our case, we know everybody actually with us 100%.
Is it really difficult to register your token with SEC security? Why you exclude nice idea?
Yeah. So I tell you in our very specific example, okay? It's very complicated process. We have done a screening on that. And there is no guarantee whatsoever that they're going actually to accept your registration. That's also an important thing to realize. So what we basically were thinking, if we do that kind of thing, we would not do it through the current legal entity we're doing, but we would register a special entity for registration, for example, in the US itself. See what I mean? I mean, I wouldn't do that, let's say, from a Hong Kong-based entity or even a European-based entity. I would probably set up, I mean, this is our initial line of thinking here. And it's a very complicated process.
You mean expensive or long-term?
Expensive as well, of course. You have definitely to hire a very good legal in the US. We had an offer for that was about 90,000 to anything from 90,000 to 150,000 US dollars as an initial cost. In time, it can be anything from 3 to 9 months. Without any guarantee of success. So in our specific case, we feel more comfortable working with the EU legislation. This is where we come from. We are also lucky enough to have back channels to the European Commission and understand their views on things. and be actually even able to contribute to these views. So we're definitely going for an EU entity here. Yes, please.
I have a startup in Switzerland, and we plan an ICO. But is there a portal where you can register in all the exchange market and the trader portals, or should we contact them one by one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So at the end of the day, you want your token to be listed in order actually there is liquidity behind. So your investors can sell, and new investors can buy, and so on, so forth. I'm not aware of any central, website or authority which kind of like gathers all the exchanges. Usually, it's one by one negotiations. Sometimes you have to fill up a form on the website. We've been lucky to be introduced to many of these exchanges. The way it's starting to work now, as you said, it's changing. The landscape is changing every 3 months. The way it works usually right now, you have first to register your tokens with so-called tier 2 exchanges. The tier 1, it's good that they know about you. They watch your trade volumes, and at some point, if they feel like you are a good candidate to join them, then they will list you as well. But for now, it's usually that it's very usual that you are on tier 2 exchanges, and also you want, ideally, when you start, to be listed on at least 2 or 3 exchanges around the world. So at least, let's say, one Asian one maybe European-based, and one maybe one US-based. Welcome. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. We have taken some overtime here. I'm open to any private questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.